So we're going to get our wonderful next session started. So I am very excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Isis Artze Vega. Isis serves as College Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at Valencia College in Central Florida. At this time, I'll pass things over to Isis.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Isaiah, and thanks everyone for making the time. I know this is I think third or fourth in a series, and so I'm glad that you're still hanging in. And I'm so appreciative that your leadership has focused on this important topic of joy, particularly today, right? When it can seem like an uphill battle to find joy. And I would say that the topic of this session and earning and maintaining the trust of our Gen Z students is part and parcel of finding joy. So much of my work and research so far has been focused on relationships, as I'll tell you about in a moment. And relationships are a crucial source of joy. And of course, only when those relationships are characterized by kind of mutual trust and respect. So I really see this integral to the theme of today. Let me share my screen. And let's see. I'm going to do something that Gen Zers wouldn't do, and I'm going to ask Alyssa to make sure that everything looks good, right? Okay.
Looks great.
Thank you. I am a late Gen Xer, so I'll say that. And my name is Isis. I use she, her pronouns. And again, I'm really humbled to be here with all of you and excited to learn from you. I was told it was on purpose that some of your speakers and facilitators today don't know your work intimately. And so I only wish we had more time so that I could learn more about how trust manifests itself in your work. But I have a couple of moments where I want to hear from you in the chat. So I'm looking forward to that. I want to say just two things before moving forward. One is that I have been a student of the generational perspectives, right, for a while now, long before we were talking about Gen Z students. And earlier, I want to confess to you that I was a bit of a skeptic. I didn't always see the generational analyses yielding so many insights that helped me in my work. When we got to the millennials, yes, there were some things there that I found helpful, but I am finding the generational scholars, right? I'm not one of them, but I'm finding their work most important and relevant to me and right now with Gen Z students. So it really, the topic of today's session is something that is really resonating with me because our students are so fundamentally different from many of us. And as I'll discuss, those differences can come in the way of trust. So one is I value the generational perspective, but just a reminder, as always, that we cannot generalize, right? The students before us are individual human beings, and we owe them that respect, right? Of not making assumptions simply based on their generation or any other identity. And then the other kind of disclaimer I would say is that a lot of the research doesn't come up to today. And so some of the most recent trends that we're seeing with Gen Z students, and I would say especially with respect to gender and ideology, is so current that I won't speak to that in depth. So I wanted to make sure to share with you my appreciation for generational analyses, but also that I understand the limits and the limits of the research. All right. So I'm the provost, and that could mean nothing relative to this topic, right? I don't go around spending as much time with students as you do or as I would like. So I want to share that I come to this work and from two recent projects. The one on the left, and they're both free, which is why I don't feel badly sharing them with you. The ebooks are available for free. The one on the left is particularly for faculty, and it's a teaching guide. And in there, my colleagues and I isolate the importance of trust in teaching to college faculty. And so that required a deep dive into the research on trust. So my expertise in trust comes primarily from this project. And then on the right is a ebook for students, or a physical book, but also available as a free book. And again, the work of relationships and joy really is hand in hand. And our audience in this book are Gen Z students. And so we did our analyses there. So one more about me, and then I'm pivoting to you. This is just to share with you that my experience with housing and res life is primarily as on the left, student, that was me. I had moved in. It was 1996. She is still my very best friend, though she could not believe I had to share a room with a stranger. And on the right, I have the mom of two Gen Z students, and the one in purple, we moved into her dorm last August, and thank goodness they're kicking her out next weekend, and I get to bring her back home for a little bit. So those are some of my connections to your work. What I wanted to share here, especially knowing that it is 3 o'clock and that you have been busy today, is an invitation to take a breath, to look at something that's not just your screen and words, and to remember, right? And for me, these visuals are visual reminders that in order to do anything effectively and to find joy, we really, really have to take good care of ourselves. So if you sometimes need permission or a nudge, I wanted to give you this image, encourage you to really fill up your lungs with some air, and remember that we can't do right by our students or anybody else unless we take really good care of ourselves. The other thing that I want to do now is to ask you some questions about the topics that we're going to think about together. And this is really important from a learning design perspective. I can just talk, and you can kind of grab things along the way, but that's not really how learning happens. And I am a student of learning science. And so I wanted to give you this opportunity, and I will show you all of these questions to ground yourself in the topic so that later on when we have time for questions and I'm sharing things, you can connect what I'm sharing to what is happening for you or to what you want to learn, right? Because I am here for you and I want to be helpful. So what you're wondering about this topic of trust, I heard it was a suggested topic, so I'm very eager to hear why you suggested it. Challenges that you may have encountered in earning or maintaining trust, and then opportunities that you see, right? This is not only going to be a challenge kind of question. So I'm going to mute myself and be, or I'm going to be quiet for a couple moments so that you can maybe jot down some thoughts, and those will serve as really good anchors as I proceed. Well, and that was insignificant amount of time, but I got to move forward. I have a hard stop at 3:50, so here we go. I have 4 goals for our time together. Like a good educator, I want to make sure I backward design our time together, and here they are. We're going to remind ourselves why trust matters so much, right? It can seem elusive and like obvious that it's important, but let's think about why. We're going to look at some Gen Z traits that can come in the way or maybe delay trust. And then elements that can help foster trust. We will review some strategies, and I hope we'll have time to crowdsource some in the chat. And then we will revisit your wonderings, what's on your mind, and your questions. All right, so why trust? There are many definitions, of course. Steve Covey, son of Steve Covey, has a book on trust. And so I wanted to bring you a definition that really aligns with the research on the education side of the house, right? So the definition here is that it's confidence, and that confidence comes from 2 separate dimensions: character and competence. And we'll talk about those on the next slide. But I thought this was lovely, right? Trust is the glue of life. And the most essential ingredient in effective communication, and I would say in relationship, the principle that holds all of our relationships together. So that is a grounding in what trust is and why it matters. Educators and people who work in higher ed break it down further. So we had competence and integrity, and here the scholars in our work will add beneficence. So competence, and this one, when I talk to faculty, they think that they have expertise in their field. How could that, right? How could they be more competent? But that's not what earns students' trust. Here, it's competence that we know how to do our jobs well, and we know how to do right by them. So that's the kind of competence here with respect to students. And here I'm speaking generally of all students. Integrity and the alignment of our actions and words and being trustworthy. And then beneficence is, again, having that their interest as a priority, demonstrating that we will support them and have their best interest at heart. Now, I mentioned a little bit ago, and we looked at the definition, and it can seem intuitive, like trust. Everyone knows that's a good thing. But what I wanted to share here is that this is a primal need. This is something that's wired into our brain. It isn't, again, like a social courtesy or a nice to have. It's nice to be trusting and trustworthy. Our brains are really good at protecting us. That's what they were designed to do evolutionarily. And the need to be connected to others and to be in trusting relationship, that's what makes our brains kind of relax. When they tell us that we're safe, then we can do other things, right? So what happens when our students and ourselves, when we are not sure if we can trust people or if we feel alone, right? Then our brains are busy scanning the environment, and then we can't focus on finding joy or learning or growing or engaging or listening. So really, I say this to say that it is essential to everything we want to do to students. It is a foundational layer of all the good things that we hope to accomplish in higher education. What I want to hear from you, and I'm going to open the chat and somebody tells me if I mess up the screen, but I would love to hear from you some perspectives on why earning your Gen Z students' trust is essential to the work that you do. Let's see who's going to put something in there first. And if someone wants to be brave and unmute yourself, by all means. Okay, for building community. Oh, yes. Gigi says to help sure that they report incidents. Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday. The thought that we want them to come to you when they're in need, and if they don't trust you, then they won't come to you. Okay. It helps them to develop as people, a safe space for them to be open. Yes, safety and trust, mutual respect. I love this. Oh, ooh, that's deep. Shika says, through trusting in me, they trust the why in what we do. Yes. And I would say, Shika, that if you share the why, that helps engender trust. Because their perspective is invaluable. And if they don't trust you, you won't hear it. Okay, this is so good. I told you I needed more time with you, but all right, I'm gonna keep going. If you have other ideas, put them in the chat. Hopefully, Alyssa will share them with me. Will share the chat data with me later. All right. All right. So this is not as a downer kind of moment, but just to acknowledge that there are some challenges to trust building. And right now I am going to share one that is a challenge. I'm calling it a roadblock, right? Or a speed bump, because I don't want us to think that that's insurmountable. Oh, uh-oh. Sorry about that. Where did it go? Okay, came back. I apologize. An important roadblock for us to be mindful of is what is known as a kind of a difference of identity, right? And what this means is that every time there is a layer of difference between us and the individual with whom we hope to forge a trusting relationship, there is a little bit more skepticism, a little bit more reluctance. So what kinds of differences am I referencing here? I'm thinking about differences of generation, differences of race, gender, socioeconomic status, religion, region, ability, so many, right? Especially to this generation where identity is so salient. I don't want to pretend this is a closed list. Now, this doesn't matter. It doesn't happen with any ill intent. It doesn't happen because we have biases. That's why the word here, I avoided using it, right? It's more asymmetry. And it happens because our brains have to sort us. There's so much information that the brains are absorbing that, again, from an evolutionary perspective, our brains developed a sorting mechanism. And the system of categorization and sorting. And when we were primal beings, when people shared our traits, it was easier to assume they were safe. So remember what I said about the brain keeping us safe. The brain is trying to keep us safe. And so we are what is known as in-group, out-group asymmetry means that we usually evaluate more positively individuals with whom we share identities or traits. So you can see how as you would layer differences, it becomes, there's more for us to there's a bigger gap for us to close, but it is absolutely doable. But before we talk about how to do that, I wanted to share that the difference of identity and the in-group, out-group is so important to earning the trust of Gen Z students because, as many of you will know, they are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation. And I would add to that because identities are so important to them, right? Like that that these kind of micro identities that in prior generations we really hadn't seen. The other thing that our generational theorists and experts will tell us is that for these students, for our Gen Z students, intergenerational misunderstandings are exacerbated, right? Whereas in my day, I could have just thought, oh, those admins or staff, they don't know what they're doing. I wouldn't have couched it in the language of generation. Whereas for Gen Z students, their generational identity is important, it's salient. And so there are more, this could lead to more misunderstanding as well. The really good news here, and something that I have talked to thousands of faculty from across the country about, is that trust itself can help us transcend our differences. And Zaretta Hammond, in the context of teaching, tells us that trust is a secret weapon because when students trust us, they give us permission to push them to higher levels of achievement and growth. And that reminds me of some of the comments that you made in the chat, right? We have to have their trust, and then that they have their best interest at heart, right? The beneficence. And then we have permission to support them in their growth and development in the ways that our fields have strived to do. All right. Now, I wanted to shift to some salient Gen Z traits, and I wanted to share and kind of give due credit here to the source that I was relying on, not because it's the only one or the be all end all, but I thought a really robust study of Gen Z students relative to this topic. So this is the one that I am leaning on today. All right. And so let's talk about these 3 traits. And then we'll shift to strategies for earning trust. And I want to hear yours that I didn't think of. All right. So I was thinking about that there are many traits shared in this resource, but I wanted to isolate just the ones that I think are most important to the work of trust building. So I want to take these a little bit slow. The first one is a skepticism, and the literature says actually a mistrust of institutions and of disillusionment with the kind of world they've inherited, right? So if we work at institutions, as we do, I do, you do, then the skepticism or the mistrust of the institution, some of that's kind of transferred onto us because we work there. Yeah? Does that make sense? So the skepticism and the disillusionment, right? Many of you may very well be in their generational group or really close, but the rest of us, right? We're associated with the world they're inheriting, and that's not a good look, right? And for very valid reasons. So this skepticism and this disillusionment, I think, can come in the way of trust. The second one is a value, and value almost seems like to undersell it, right? Because it's such an important value of authenticity and a real unacceptance, or they're kind of triggered by inauthenticity, right? Like this, if what you say and what you do don't align, then that's considered a breach of trust. I'm missing a word here, too. Sorry about that. And that's a quote from a Gen Z student in here, right? And in the past, we would have noticed this and maybe not liked it, but here it kind of speaks to your character. So there's a little bit of more of a strictness in the authenticity and in what a student might interpret as us being inauthentic. And then the last generational trait that I think can come in the way of trust is really being put off by the formality and hierarchy of institutions. And depending on where you work, this may be more or less relevant, right? I don't know how formal each of your institutions is, but we certainly have hierarchies, right? So we might be thinking about our role and our supervisors. And now I am even more aware of how that might be heard by a Gen Z student. And I know I have a big title, so that doesn't help me either. Okay. So we have these three, and I want to add one that I haven't seen in the research, but I can say it anyways. Is that the recent changes that we've seen by gender and the accusations of indoctrination and ideology in our institutions is certainly, I think, coming in the way of trust for a lot of students, but perhaps especially for our male students. And that saddens me really deeply, knowing the gender gap that we're seeing by attainment, and knowing that the attainment of our credentials is still such a game changer for everyone's life. So that one is heavy on my heart, and but I think something that we can expect today, and that won't surprise you. I'm going to shift to the traits that may accelerate trust. And you're going to think, you might wonder if I copy pasted my slides and forgot to change the content. But I promise you that I did this on purpose. Because when I did my soul searching and my analysis, I thought that these three very same traits are actually ways that we can help accelerate trust, right? If we know that they're skeptical about us and they're disillusioned, I feel like I need to own up to that and acknowledge that the disillusionment is warranted, right? And not, I can't be inauthentic about it. I am not. It's in my heart. But recognizing this disillusionment, talking to them about it, and then saying just helping them to see which parts of our institutions are in fact formal and hierarchical. But what if we question our institutions with them? We don't have to be the ambassador. I think a healthy skepticism about our institutions and about issues of hierarchy or formality is really a wonderful way to help them to see that we are listening to them, that we recognize these traits or these tendencies that they have, and that we want to hear them and learn from them. So I think we just securing this knowledge about them helps us to better connect and relate to them. The last point about authenticity, I think is one that I struggled with a little, because I don't want to suggest that we were ever inauthentic or trying to be inauthentic. I don't think that's the case for anyone I have worked with, faculty or staff or others. And yet I think that what I'm hearing is that Gen Z students are holding us to a higher standard. And I like that, right? This is a crucial part of our character, our integrity. It's a crucial part of leadership, right? The best leaders are the ones who demonstrate integrity, which is defined as an alignment between action and words, right? I say that as somebody who has studied leadership, so I can try to do my job well. And so let us accept that they want to hold us to this high standard. And maybe we make sure that we talk to them about grace and the fact that we're all humans and they need grace and we need grace. So we're not aiming for perfection, but we're going to really, really try to be honest and open with them, even when we're telling them, or maybe especially when we're telling them things that they may not want to hear. All right. I'm going to provide, or suggest rather, 3 ways to earn trust, and then I'll be eager again to hear from you. The first suggestion that I have is to take the kind of broad view or a holistic approach. And here is an example or an image to describe what I mean by that. So in the Norton Guide to Equity-Minded Teaching that I had the great honor of editing and writing with brilliant people, we center trust. You'll see it over here if my cursor works, in the day-to-day teaching, right? How your work when you're teaching students in real time is to earn their trust and then to keep it. But what we tell faculty, and I would say educators more broadly, is that it's all connected, right? And that you can't design poor programming or design bad meetings and then show up and try to earn trust and then hope it worked well, right? Like that's not a strategy. So instead, what I suggest to you, right, which is probably a big part of your work and your work anyways, is to plan with great intention, right? Thinking about relevance and thinking about transparency so that the things you ask students to do are meaningful, right? Students, when they resent us, when we ask them to do things that aren't meaningful, we kind of did that to ourselves, right? So we design with intention, right? And maybe we design with them to make sure that it is relevant and helpful. And then in real time, in our real-time interactions, we foster trust and we trust them, right? We support them and we structure their work. the work that we do with them. And then finally, like all good practitioners, we reflect and we gather data and we find out if we, in this case, did they trust us? And if not, why not? And how do we learn so that we can do better next time? And the cycle continues. So this cycle of continuous planning, doing, and reflecting with data, I would say is our best chance at earning anyone's trust, right? Is intentionality and in a holistic way, not like we're going to have trust Tuesdays and kind of pop it into a system that is dysfunctional, right? It has to be broader and more holistic in my perspective. The second suggestion comes from one of my very favorite research articles. And since I'm a scholar in my heart, I'm not embarrassed to share with you that I have favorite research articles and that I share them with my friends when I get excited. So lots of my friends got this one in the mail when I found it. It is a study of trust and how students decided who to trust and how they came to trust educators. It was conducted in an urban high school with older students, and the relevance to our sector, I would say, is really it's extremely relevant. So I'm not of the mind that if it doesn't happen in higher ed, it's not relevant. So I bring it to you as I have brought it to hundreds and hundreds of faculty by now. And what the essence of this theory that they came up with is that when students meet us, right? They're kind of giving us the look, the up and down look, right? They're kind of checking us out. They're not sure, and they definitely are not starting from a place of trust. I would say, especially our students from marginalized backgrounds and identities, right? They're giving us the up and down look, right, in their brain, and they're trying to figure out, can I trust this person, right? And here are some of the specific questions that are on their minds. Why are they here? How much do they respect me? How much do they know and care about me? And why I find this study so valuable is that now that we know that these are questions on students' minds, we can anticipate the questions and not leave them hanging, right? We can answer those questions in our interactions with them, in our communications with them, in our introductions when we meet them, right? So they're thinking these things, and we get out ahead with things like this. So what I have updated this table for Gen Z students. Why are they here, right? We let them know why you do your job, why you work in higher ed, maybe why you believe in the organization or your particular institution, right? Thinking about that lack of institutional trust. How much do they know and care about me? Since you know that how they identify and their background are such important parts of Gen Z students' identities, you take the time to get to know them, to hear how they identify, and to reflect that back to them with care and respect. How much do they respect me? Avoiding unnecessary criticism and trusting them. I think that's an underutilized strategy for earning trust, is demonstrating trust. So we trust them. This point here about trusting them with knowledge of your non-professional life, it is also really important to Gen Z students because they are wanting to know that we are three-dimensional human beings as well. And then in this last one of how real you are, learning about Gen Z, and I would say talking to them about what you're learning demonstrates your commitment to understanding them as different from you, right? So they're interested in themselves as a generation, so we demonstrate interest in their generational perspectives as well. The last suggestion that I have for you comes courtesy of Zaretta Hammond, and I referenced her a little bit ago, and she has a list of 3, 4, 5, what she calls trust generators, and I have a couple here that I think are especially helpful for earning the trust of Gen Z students. I want to focus on this first one, which is selective vulnerability. And this, in Zaretta Hammond's research, is about trust across humans. So she's not Gen Z yet. I'm gonna provide her Gen Z example. Zaretta Hammond tells us that people respect and connect with others who share their non-perfect human vulnerable moments, right? This is just in the trust research broadly. But what the Gen Z researchers tell us, and I have a quote here, is that for our Gen Z students, revealing a weakness is honest, authentic, and appreciated. And so I know that as professionals, we often don't want to share our weaknesses. I would say that that is a specific kind of vulnerability that could be especially important in earning and maintaining the trust of our Gen Z students. Um, Familiarity, right? Finding things that we have in common, like our interest. And then I also want to highlight the fourth one here, concern. People connect when concern is shown for something that's important to the other. So what do your Gen Z students care about? These are general categories from the research, but I would say there's no substitute than asking your particular students that you work with. And so here are some common ones: the environment, the equitable treatment across identity, mental health, some top concerns that are really salient to your work. You mentioned mental health indirectly earlier in the chat. And so recognizing their concerns and demonstrating that they are important to you as well is an important way to demonstrate trust. I have a bonus one that didn't make it into a slide, but I think that the more I think about and talk to Gen Z students, especially as I prepared for today, the smarter I got. And what I mean is that they know so much and they are very generous and willing to share. And so I would say my fourth tip, if I could add a slide now, would be kind of like be meta with them, right? Say, trust is going to be so important to our relationship. I want to earn your trust. And here are some of the things that I will do to try to earn your trust. What else would you suggest that I do? Or, hey, I'm sensing that we haven't done so great on the trust thing because nobody's coming to me with any issues. No one's coming for help, and that is heavy on me because I can't do my job well unless you trust me. So I'm going to send around an anonymous survey and find out like what's gone wrong and what can I do differently, right? So being explicit and meta about trust, I think, could go a long way as well. And now I am going to open my chat and excitedly wait for some of your ideas and you're sharing with me and with one another. What has worked for you? Maybe something that I mentioned, something altogether different, or you want to contradict something I said. All of that is available to you. So I'm going to open the chat and I'm eager to learn from you. How do you earn your students' trust? Oh, yeah, Bob, the commonality. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Isaiah's suggestion about inviting them to search committees, task forces, that is a really wonderful way to demonstrate that you trust them. Because if you didn't trust them, you wouldn't have them work on important, authentic things. So I love this idea, right? What a wonderful demonstration of trust. Oh, Margaret says owning mistakes, being willing to implement their feedback, so important, right? If we ask for feedback and we don't implement it, then our request was inauthentic, right? And we've already heard how inauthenticity was always bad, but is especially problematic here. Oh, Luis, this is so important. Getting to know them outside of the context of trouble and crisis, that is crucial, right? So that you have a foundation of trust that you can use when there is a time of trouble or crisis. Joseph writes about walking them through the reasoning. Yes, that's a great example of transparency. Otherwise, they could just, it could look like a power play, right? Like we're asking them to do something because we said so or because we think we know better versus you have a job to do. You have a literature base or a research base. You have a supervisor. These things are happening. I love that, Joseph. Let's look at a couple more. I knew this would get exciting, so I'm glad Alyssa will share this chat with me. Spending time at events or things that are important to them outside of your role. Yes, you're demonstrating interest in them as human beings. I love that. An open door policy, yes. And they do need safe spaces, Dawn, so I love this. Work accountability space. Oh boy, now I want to know all about that. Luis is I'm gonna have to find him later and ask him about this. Plus knitting circles, right? Okay, this is incredible and so rich. I promised time for for questions. So I think, let's see, maybe a few more. I can't pull myself away. I'm going to start from the bottom now. Oh, Takumi has such a great one, right? Because sometimes you feel like you might need to be the one with the answer, and you pivot to responding. But what the one way to earn trust is really to give students the respect of listening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we might not have guidance in real time, and that's okay too. Oh, I love this so much. Professionalism, but with jokes, right? I love that from Jay Mills. Tell them what the process looks like. Oh, yes. We talk at Valencia about student rights and responsibilities. And sometimes I think we over-index on the responsibilities and the policies, but they have rights. And so I think Gigi speaks to this pattern of community standards. And in there, I think helping them see where they have rights is a really important part of earning trust as well. Okay, so good. And if you had one in here, I promised that I wanted to read all of them, but time did not permit for me today. All right. I wanted to, before we open it up for questions, and I am eager to hear your questions for each other, for me, I wanted to check in. I thought this would be an interesting one for us to think about as we start to wind down, because you really do want to know if it's working, right? And so I'm hearing in your chat insights that you're hosting these events, that you have an open door policy. And so I'm going to say things that you already know. But as one of my Gen Z informants who is in my home will say, the people we trust, we spend a lot of time with them. We're always there. We go see them. We ask questions. And the people we don't trust, we avoid. So that's really sophisticated Gen Z N of one, but really consistent with my experiences. So I wanted to say that, right? Take the time to pay attention to whether you are being trusted and you are being taken up on your offers and your activities. And if not, don't take that into your heart, and don't take that to be any sign of your lack of authenticity or care or skill. That's not what I'm talking about here. When I partnered with faculty, many of them would bring to me their teaching evaluations and they would say, Isis, why do my students say that they don't feel respected? And I would say, it's not because you don't respect them, because I know that you do. Let's do a little research in finding out which of your behaviors they're interpreting as disrespect so that we can work on those behaviors and they can see how much you really do respect them, right? Here, I would say the same thing to you. If they're not coming to you, or you sense they're not trusting you, or you know that they're not trusting you because you say that, that is something that you can work on, right? And so knowing it is important. It's not an indication of your character, your ability. It means that it's something you have to think about, notice, like a researcher, what is leading to that breach of trust, and then take some of the intentional efforts that we've talked about today to kind of flip that script and get them to trust you. But you got this. All right. I have about 10 minutes, which is what I wanted to set aside for questions. And so if it's okay, I would love to see more of your faces and stop sharing. And I'm going to open up my chat and hopefully we'll have some good conversation. And if you want to unmute yourself, then I don't have to keep hearing my voice, and that would make me happy too. What questions do you have? What strategies do you have? Let's not limit this conversation. What challenges? I asked you that at the top. Challenges that you've had with earning trust, or opportunities that you see. And Luis, you came off mute.
I did, Isis. I was just gonna ask you. I don't. Maybe we have your resume somewhere up, but I was curious about your own kind of academic journey, or have you always been in academic affairs, or have you shifted from student affairs at one point over into academic affairs? Just curious about your life's journey, and how you got to this place.
I love that. Thank you, Luis. My first full-time job in an institution was teaching, right? Not in a fancy tenure job, but as a lecturer. And I was teaching students who just got to college. And I love that, right? That newness, that excitement, that opportunity. And then I was a student of both academic and student affairs. So I have a postgraduate degree in student development and theory. So that is my most robust experience. And then some of my portfolio as provost overlaps with some student affairs functions, but mostly I taught, I helped faculty teach more effectively, and then I became provost with a lot of responsibilities that kind of cross over. Yeah.
And so you're talking to a lot of folks who are in residential life
Yes.
and the work that we're doing here. Have you seen any kind of effective collaborations between folks in academic affairs and residential life that you're just like, oh, could share?
My favorite one, I love this question, Luis. My favorite one is from a dear friend, faculty member, whose students didn't come to his office hours. And so he went to their residence halls, and that's where he hosted them. So, right, they spread the word. This professor will be here, whether he's in your class, right? I think even better would be to open it up and to say, hey, you don't know how to talk to your professors. We're going to have these people coming in and helping you practice, pretend you're in an office hour, or to have actual faculty come and have office hours. That one I have seen been extremely effective. So I'll leave it at that because I see Melody raised her hand. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, and I appreciate everything that was shared. I'm going to lean into a brave space, and I also don't mean to be creating any. Yeah, anyways, I wanted to ask about politics on campus too, because I think, yeah, a lot of people are nodding their heads, and how to navigate that on campus, both from this perspective of allowing students to share and being their own perspective while also being transparent yourself, knowing too that students will all have different perspectives that they're bringing in, especially in campuses that have maybe more international students in our case, as well as navigating like internal politics too. And just curious how you navigate, or if there's any tips or tricks you have in still maintaining that trust, creating that space, but also, yeah, navigating the challenges within politics in general. So thank you.
Thank you, Melody. I being an administrator in Florida means I have more experience with politics than anybody ever wanted to have. So I am I am with you in terms of the challenges that can present. I want to separate dealing with politics, state and federal level politics from the internal, because you mentioned both, because I think they call for different strategies. So I'll do the second one first, just because it's quicker. In terms of internal politics and institutional politics, I think some of what we discussed really holds, right? If students are already skeptical of our institutions, and then they see that we have all this weird politics happening, then that just adds to their sense that, like, what are we doing, right? And so I do think transparency there, being careful, right? Because you have risks for your profession, but maybe being transparent with students about how you are navigating it and what you're learning. But I think that one is a little bit more manageable, though I don't know that if there are specific internal politic thing that could exacerbate it. So I think that one's going to be case by case. What we are sharing as institutions of higher learning in terms of this broader political attack, right, in many ways, right, and it has been called an attack by the people who are doing it. So I feel comfortable that I'm not using a subjective term there. Is much harder, and so I think that what I would suggest is a couple things, and I see some significant risks here. One is we've never seen this before. So the staff member, the faculty member, the leader who pretends like we know how to navigate things, we figured it out, that's it. They can't trust us anymore because we don't. We don't know how to navigate this. We don't know how it's going to go down. We have to be honest with our students that we are with our process. Here's how we're navigating. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. Here are the guideposts and the principles guiding us. But the minute we pretend to know all the things or have answers, then we have lost their trust because we don't. It's too hard. It's too complicated right now. So I think it's a really important moment to be vulnerable and transparent, and therefore authentic. The other thing I would say is that because students always had differing political views and ideologies, and even now for our students, what I'm noticing is they could share some beliefs with one party and another. That's valid, right? And so I do think there's a risk in disclosing too many of our personal views, because we run the risk of alienating significant portions of our students or even a subset of our students. And we really do have a responsibility to all of them. So in terms of your professional kind of code of ethics, I think that I would strive toward disclosing very little overtly about my political views. That is actually a choice that I have made, though people can deduce based on other things. And then one thing that I think is really risky is how much each of you may have on your social media platforms and communities. And so what you don't want is for students to see one thing and then have you represent your views differently in person. So if we go back to that inconsistency and authenticity, I think there's a real risk there. A third approach, I would say, is to share as much as you feel comfortable sharing and describing your why, and then coupling that with a very intentional message and behaviors that say, and I don't expect you to believe what I believe, and I am listening and want to learn from your varied perspectives. So that's a lot, Melody. I hope some of that made some sense and was helpful.
It was. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Alyssa told me I have a hard stop at 3:50, so I think we might have time for one more question. You got other sessions and you might need a bio break, some water, snack.
Isis, I'm happy to ask a question. Residence life staff are often frontline. We are often the staff that are maybe sometimes the first point of contact a student has, especially if there's a problem or an issue or a concern. And one of the things I and my staff have experienced is when students have a lack of trust institutionally because perhaps they feel that they look at the institution's values and what they say or what the president of the institution says, and then they have an experience that counters that. But because residence life staff are frontline staff, we're the ones that often receive the brunt of the "we don't trust you." When oftentimes we're not necessarily the rule creator. We didn't make the controversial decision to, for example, not let that.
Might disagree with it, right, Isaiah? Yeah.
Exactly. We also oftentimes, unlike tenured faculty who get a little bit more academic freedom to have and express their opinions, we often have to sit on the sidelines and maintain a neutral approach. And so there's any thoughts and reflections on how to navigate that?
Isaiah, you just reminded me of something that my my other Gen Z informant shared with me yesterday, a niece who's staying with me. And she said, I think it's really, it's a really hard position for res life workers because on the one hand, you need to earn trust. And on the other hand, there's kind of built-in suspicion because you're the closest kind of authority nearby. And you have things that you are required to do by virtue of your roles and responsibilities that could seem like they're in tension with your commitment to students. I would be as transparent and upfront with that, right? Like, so someone mentioned that in the chat, not waiting for a problem. Maybe it was Luis, saying to students, okay, so when things go down, you might think to when you meet them, right? This some of the kind of introductory material, and you're going to say, how can Isaiah stand up for this? Why didn't he say anything? And I want you to remember that I, Isaiah, have this job and it has these risks and it has these things. And I have a mortgage or a family or right. And so I share this with you in the spirit of trust and transparency. I want you to know where I have some agency and where I don't. I want you to know that I work here, but I won't believe or agree with all of the institutional decisions, right? And being frank with them. I think they're not always looking for the answer they want to get, but they want to hear the truth. And they want to hear your truth. And I, even to the point of saying to them, you know what, I wish I could share with you all of the reasons that this happened, but what I am able to share is X and Y, right? That is honesty, that is authenticity, and I think that will go a really long way. I stopped sharing my slides, but what I wanted to share on the last slide, and so I hope you'll see it, is an appreciation for the work that you do. So many of us, right, we don't hear that enough, and so I want you to know is that in the trenches, and I know you are in there and on the front line, you are making an enormous difference, and we are so grateful for you, and I'm grateful for the time we shared today. Thank you so much.